as sad and blue as I can be. Well, I'll say, if you're gone away, I've one ideal only. Don't think you'll ever get rid of me.
I have lived in Columbus, Mississippi my entire life. I have been raised on stories of antebellum houses filled with ghosts and legends. I want to talk about a few of those. Those legends have become one of my favorite parts of my town, and one of the houses in particular has always stuck with me. The Waverly Mansion is actually in West Point, Mississippi, a few miles away from Columbus, Mississippi. I want to talk about why exactly this house has stuck with me for so long, as I visited it as a kid, and I also want to talk about the history of the house and what makes it special, the ghosts inside of it. Before we talk about the ghosts of the house, I want to talk about the setting, as I describe where Waverly Mansion is located. I also want to talk about the various hands that Waverly has passed through, creating its rich history. In 1852, Colonel George Hampton Young built the mansion in Mississippi between Columbus and West Point. This is where he raised 6 boys and 4 girls, who all fortunately grew to adulthood.
Big luxury. Whereas Colonel Young had the money. He represented the top 1% of Southern society. Most of your poor white farmers out there only had 30 or 40 acre spread. And they wouldn't have a single field hand. The Colonel had 180 of them. Wow. So they had a big plantation, 2,000 acres under cultivation. Mostly cotton, but they grow a little bit of corn to fodder their animals.
Weekly dances were held in the Waverly Ballroom, filling the houses with lively music that echoed through the halls. It is believed that during this time, the first American saddle blankets were produced at Waverly, and the first fox hunting association was formed in the mansion's library in 1893. Once the house was in the hands of Colonel Young's son, Captain William Young, the mansion became a refuge for the families left homeless by the war.
A lot of women and children stayed there. One night there came a scare that the Union cavalry were real close. Women and children fled from the log house to sleep in this hallway. One little girl couldn't get to sleep because her cat and her dog were out there. Aww. Colonel Young let the animals come in and sleep with the little girl. The cat's name, according to the letter, was Tippy Canoe.
After the death of Captain Young in 1913, the house was left abandoned. It then stayed uninhabited until almost 50 years later. In 1962, the house was found by Robert Snow and Donna Snow. They made it their mission to restore the mansion to its former glory. Eventually, they achieved that goal and got the house up to where it currently stands. During this venture, they ended up giving tours to people who were interested in the mansion's history as a small way to get funding for the restoration. Originally, Robert Snow did not intend to give tours, but people would randomly show up to the mansion asking to see all the original furnishings that they kept up. In 1974, the mansion was named a National Historical Landmark, cementing the mansion's place in Mississippi history. After Robert Snow's death, the mansion was put up for sale in 2017 by his son. At the time, they were asking for $2.9 million for it, but later the house was sold for $1.2 million in 2018 to Charlie and Dana Stevenson. The Stevensons currently don't live at the house, so they are working on renovations. That is shown in the clips of the house that is included, as we were taking a tour during the renovations. Also, after Robert Snow's death, the 4 remaining peacocks that lived on the property were sold.
A very rich attorney. In the 1830s, he bought 50,000 acres of land in northern Mississippi. This entire area once belonged to the Chickasaw and Choctaw Indian tribes. 1842, he moved out here with his wife Lucy and 10 children.
10?
Yes, ma'am. They started living in a log house out that way. But by 1852, it was getting much too crowded. Besides, at that point, they had 2,000 acres of cotton under cultivation. He felt it was time to begin building up the mansion. Unfortunately, Lucy died the first year. She would never live to see this finished. It took the Colonel nearly 6 years to complete. He was able to hold on to it during the Civil War. Very fortunate that the Union Army never paid him a visit. All 6 of his sons were in the Confederate Army. The Colonel lived here until his own death in 1880. At that point, 2 of his sons moved in, a pair of old bachelor brothers. George, Valerius, and Willie. Their friends called them Val and Captain Billy. The younger brother, Captain Billy, was more into gambling and drinking. He loved to play poker in the hall with his friends, cockfights in the front yard on Saturdays. He was always good for placing a wager. When these two brothers died, no one else in the family cared to live here. When Captain Billy, the last brother, died in 1913, the mansion sat vacant for nearly 50 years. That's amazing.
Now that the house's history is out of the way, let me tell you about the truly interesting part. The house's history of ghosts and how they came about. The most fascinating part is that the ghosts rumored to inhabit the Waverly Mansion have been found to be real people. Most of these stories are collections of internet theories and speculations and findings, and I will include the real clips from the tour guide, which is a much more reliable source for exactly what is haunting the house, as he has been giving tours there for a very long time. While the house was abandoned by all life for 50 years, that does not mean it was uninhabited. During this time, the locals would report hearing music coming from the mansion. This wasn't just a case of teenagers breaking in either. It was piano music, and everyone says that these parties were an echo of the ones that used to be held there. There were also reports of seeing the spirit of an Indian riding bareback on a stallion through the fields. This Indian is the ghost of Major John Plitchin. He was orphaned at a young age and taken in by Choctaw Indians and was then buried in Young Cemetery near Waverly in 1835. Another ghostly presence in the mansion is Colonel Young. Guests have seen him appear inside of mirrors, and whenever he appears, he's still in his colonel uniform. Also, after her death in 1991, Mrs. Snow has been seen on the third floor stairs smoking.
Can you tell us about the ghosts that inhabit the house?
Well, the family history has it that she was the granddaughter of Dr. William Burt. According to this story, Dr. Burt was doing some business in town for a few days. Well, his daughter and granddaughter came to stay at Colonel Young's. In the middle of the night, the story goes that the little girl got out of bed. She ran up one of the staircases. Apparently, she fell down the staircase and broke her neck. She was only 18 months old. It's interesting, though, that there's the Young family cemetery out there in the woods. Nearby is the Burt family cemetery. Dr. Burt has two granddaughters buried next to him. One tombstone reads Carrie Ann, age 4. The other reads Cynthia, aged 18 months. Might have been the name of the girl.
Is that the only ghost that is in the house?
People have claimed to have seen other ghosts. The men do not say they see and hear a little girl. I have met a few of them that say they've seen some of Captain Billy's drinking buddies in the hallway kind of walking around tipsy, and they notice someone looking at them and they'll disappear. I have heard stories of a man on a dark horse galloping down the old dirt road.
Yeah.
Some college students said they saw that.
What's that about?
Well, whether he was a soldier on a desperate errand for the army or whether he was a man riding in case of emergency, I don't know. One morning I was sitting here on this front porch and I saw a man riding on a horse all of a sudden. I looked over there and I realized it was a gentleman down the road. He owns a tan horse. He was walking his horse, just riding him, galloping.
Scary. Yeah. Alden, do you have any questions?
I read something about one of the portraits in the house that their eyes follow you. Is that the big portrait of
Miss Donna Snow? Mr. Timms did it in such a way that the eyes will follow you. A good painter can make that happen. It's not haunted any, as far as I know.
Wow, that's very cool. This is really, really beautiful.
It's always felt to me like a friendly place. Whatever ghosts haunt here are scary.
Yeah. When I was looking up the lore for the little girl and stuff, I read multiple different theories on who she was and stuff like that. And one of them was that she had gotten her head stuck in between the rails.
There's a version of that. Either way, she broke her neck. There is a version of it where she was climbing up the staircase, got nervous, put her head between two spindles, and her head got stuck and broke her neck. I have heard of cases of children getting their heads stuck in the spokes of wagon wheels. It could happen that way. Stories get bigger and bigger sometimes they're retelling, and sometimes people recall things differently.
Yeah, there were also there was an account that claimed that they found records of a little girl dying of, I forgot the disease name.
It was diphtheria.
Yeah.
And I believe that was Carrie Ann. That was the other granddaughter of Dr. Burt that died here. She died here of disease. She was a little older than this child. This little child says, "Mama, Mama," like a little girl. I've had people claim that she's moved pennies around the house. I've had some claim that they've seen like a reflection of her in one of these red panes of glass. So things like that.
Now I'll discuss the main haunting. The Snows first started to suspect that there was more to their new home when they heard crashes at night. It is then that they discovered the most active ghost in the house. Mrs. Snow began to hear cries of a little girl screaming "Mama." The Snow children would run to their mother and ask if the little girl was okay. She then found that between 2 and 4 on summer afternoons, an impression of a little girl would appear on one of the beds upstairs. She began to keep this bed constantly made up for the girl in case she wanted to take a nap, and that is how the bed is left today. Mrs. Snow then had the girl appear one day next to her in the kitchen. She was crying in pain for her mama, and once Mrs. Snow asked the girl how she could help her, the little girl disappeared. After that, she was never heard crying around the house again.
Mama, Mama. Some say she climbs into the bed up there and leaves the imprint of an invisible body. Other people tell me she floats down the staircase from the 3rd story. A blonde-haired girl in a white nightgown. Family history has it that a little girl was visiting here with her mother. She was only 18 months old. One night when they were asleep, the little girl got out of bed. She ran up one of the staircases. Apparently she fell down the staircase and broke her neck. Never met her personally.
Despite not being heard crying for her mother again, she has still been seen around the house, and in particular on the staircase. Each person who sees her says she appears to be 4 or 5, has on a white high-neck gown, and has dark blonde hair. I'll now tell the internet version of the story of the little girl, and I'll include the clip of the tour guide telling the actual story. The staircase plays an important role in this story of the little girl because in 1997 they found records of the 2 little girls who died in Waverly on the same week. These deaths happened during the time in the house's history when they served as a home for the homeless. One of these little girls died of diphtheria, an infection that causes a thick covering in the back of the throat. The other, however, is believed to be the 3-year-old daughter of a neighboring plantation owner. While visiting the house, she got her head stuck in the spindles on the staircase. In her struggle to get out, her neck broke. She was then buried in Young Cemetery, a block from Waverly. Now, because I'm actually a skeptic, I want to quickly mention a couple of times that actual paranormal investigators have visited the mansion before I dive into my own history with it. The North Mississippi Afterlife, a paranormal investigation group, performed a thorough investigation of the house and found only small amounts of evidence that it was haunted. Then, L. Sidney Fisher, an author and paranormal researcher, wrote an article about the mansion because she visited for the first time and heard light and vibrant piano music in the parlor when there was no one behind the piano. After this occurrence, she revisited in 2016 with an EMF detector. If you don't know, an EMF detector can supposedly detect an otherworldly presence by reading the fields emitted by moving electrically charged objects. The detector did not respond to any of the rooms except for the parlor. Once the parlor, it lit up wildly, confirming the presence of spirits in the room. There have also been several books written about the house. We have finally come to the part where I want to tell my own experience with the little girl who resides in the house. I was very young when this happened, so some of my memory may be off, but I wanted to include it as an explanation for my interest in the house and as a little story. I'll start by telling you that when my grandmother was a teenager while the mansion was abandoned, her and her friends would sneak inside and look at all the graffiti and vandalism done over the years. So me and my sister grew up hearing these stories about the mansion. Her stories, though, never included the ghosts that inhabit it. My sister is older than me, and one day she decided that she wanted to take a tour of the mansion. So our mom took us to the mansion, and the woman who owned the house at the time gave us a tour through the mansion, showing us the history that has been left there after decades of use. I remember seeing the old portraits of the mansion's past inhabitants, including one whose eyes would follow you across the room, which I now know is a portrait of Mrs. Snow. I remember going up to the bedroom that was left untouched through the years, apart from the little girl that used to rest in it in the afternoon. The most memorable part of the tour, however, came as we entered the farm behind the mansion. It is home to a bunch of peacocks, which I immediately became fascinated with as a child. The tour guide told us that the farm used to be a favorite of the little girl who would play with the animals. It was then that I lingered behind the group that was in a hurry to continue the tour because I wanted to look at the peacocks. Before I knew it, I heard a girl scream. After her scream, light and small laughter echoed through the field as the peacocks started freaking out. I ran back to the tour group to seek comfort from my mom. The peacocks scared me as they were so loud. The group at that point had stopped and turned around to see what would happen with the peacocks. Once I got to my mom, I ranted about the scream I had heard and asked her what had happened. She told me she had never heard that scream, and neither did any of the rest of the group. To this day, she insists that she never heard anything, but I remember hearing that little girl scream.
Wherever you go, whatever you do, I want you to know I'm following you. Whatever you climb or tumble into, why all of the time I'm following you. The battle won't be half so hard if you've someone to share it. I'd gladly carry half the load and what's more grin and bear it. You're part of my heart. You know that it's true. Whenever you start, I'm following you. Someone to share it, I'd gladly carry half the load and what's more grin and bear it. You're part of my heart. You know that it's true. Whenever you start, I'm following